Well, so since in a lot of ways you guys are innovators of this media, and I'm wondering if we were to come back here 2013, 5 years from now, same room, same people, what do you see?
Hands.
Well, and one of the issues is that with the technology constantly changing and being unpredictable in the way it's changing, do your best to kind of tell me where you see podcasting going in the next 5 years.
Well, Around Comics will have been through their third format change.
We're already at 3, dude. We just got 2 and we didn't announce the first 2.
Go ahead. I hope that it's not a ton different, just a ton more listeners. Because I think that's the only thing that's really holding the medium back, is that there are just a lot of people who have no idea what a podcast is. I mean, I tell people, yeah, I've been doing a podcast for 3 years, and I go, what? Okay, it's a radio show on the internet. You can just download it, it's free. Okay, they have, like, they don't get it, they have no idea.
But the second that you get it in most people's hands, they would eat it up. And that's the frustrating part. It's like you've got the awareness of the technology.
Right, yeah, there's this little thing called iTunes, maybe you heard of it, you can get it there, it's free. They still don't deal,
And everybody has an iPhone.
Right.
The thing about it is that, like, I'm staking my career on, like, I really believe in it, and I'm hoping that this is great because it's kind of like a revolution in broadcasting. No more are we dependent on NBC, CBS, Fox, or ESPN Radio or whatever kind of thing. Yeah, you're free to do whatever you want. But it was really funny because a couple of months ago, my mother called me because she had read in the paper that there was going to be an internet TV show. I don't know if you ever heard of a show called Quarter Life. The guy who did My So-Called Life at 30-something was going to do a show on MySpace. And she's like, "This is amazing, you're going to do a TV show on the internet." I'm like, "Mom, I showed you the first time." I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, well, that's not really TV." And I'm like, "It is," but so it's an awareness thing, and that once people adopt it and realize it, and like, right now it's free through iTunes, but in 5 years, honestly, it's going to be hopefully on satellite radio. It's going to be, you pop up on your TV and you can go to it, you can get Comic Cube speaking around comics or other comics or around Fanboy or whoever else, and it will become ubiquitous, and we'll look back and laugh at remember when we had to get people to download it, so.
I would really like to see a closer tie between the stuff that we're talking about and our shows. So if there would be some way that you could like bundle it together or something. So if you're listening to a podcast and someone says, "You should get this book," like somehow you could get it instantly without having to, fire it, like, go home, get on the computer and click it and wait for it to be delivered. Like, that it should be instantly there.
That's going to happen.
I think it will too, but
Trust me, it's going to happen.
He's
working on it.
Everybody wants things instantly, there has to be no delay. Instant gratification. So I think that paired with the podcast would be super, super cool.
Absolutely, I think a lot of truth in that. We've been talking about this all week. I've usually been drunk talking about it, so I've been able to piece together.
Usually.
The future of comics podcast will be very parallel to the increase or decline in comic readers. It's really up to you guys and what the comics industry is able to do in the next decade with readership, and whether that is Western mainstream comics or whatever is going to be out there. When people are reading, what people read, they're hopefully going to want to know more about. And so it's really about that listener base. And right now, if you look at the listener base that we have, you can guesstimate it, you can estimate it, but it's if the amount of comic book fans out there that consider comics their primary hobby is this, the podcast audience is about this for a lot of different reasons. And it's like knowing what a podcast is, finding, going through 5 or 10 or 20 podcasts until you find the one that fits your listening list. Our show, our show is not going to appeal to everyone, and we know that. But there's a lot of people out there that have never heard of our show or podcast that it would appeal to. So it's a lot of different. It's more comic book fans and trying to get them to know what a podcast is and try that.
One of the, sort of related to that, is one of the things that's been really cool about doing this, and I'm guessing you guys have all heard this a little bit, is that one of the things we weren't expecting to get is a lot of letters from people who weren't reading comic books anymore, who started, like, we're looking through podcasts, and we're like, we were listening to the show, and now I'm starting to buy comics again. And I was like, that's awesome, because, like, and I don't mean this as self-aggrandizing people, but I'm sure we've all done it, but that was one of those effects that, like, I was like, wow, we're helping comics. And I was like, good, I don't want comics.
Personally helping.
Yeah, I mean,
Good Lord, I buy so many comics.
yeah, but I mean, like, I think, like, Chris's point is exactly, like, we'll be around as long as people are buying comics, and hopefully we'll have a hand in getting more people to buy comics, between doing the podcast, what Brian and his guys have been doing with their magazine, which is gonna, get word out and stuff like that. I mean, I think it's like 1947 TV right now, like, as far as podcasts go, and we have the opportunity to help an industry, to help it, and I think that, hopefully we can do that, so we have a job.
And I think you'll also see, as it's been happening since podcasting started, more and more niche podcasts. So eventually there will be a podcast for people who are fans of fandoms that are this big and fandoms that are this big that have like 5 other people in it. And even if the comics readership as a whole doesn't increase, like we were just talking about, Chris, I think there will always be podcasts for, like Bruce's Comics Cast, where he talks about Kirby a lot. There's no new Kirby. There's never going to be any new Kirby, but you could have comics podcasts about Kirby for like 5 years and not run out of new material, because there's always something new to talk about there.
Sure, but what a lot of it comes down to is financial viability. While this is all a labor of love for all, no one's getting rich off this stuff right now.
Money sink. It's not just a labor of love.
Exactly. At some point, to keep the production values up, but the amount of work that we put into it, I can keep doing this for 3 or 4 or 5 years, but there's a point where my wife is going to get really busy with me if I'm not able to buy her bright shiny things because of the podcast. And that kind of goes back to
The absolute sun cutter.
Oversized though.
trying to buy an absolute edition, not easy. But and that comes back to a lot of stuff we probably don't want to get into, but like sponsorships and advertising. That comes back to how big your listening audience is, how appealing that is for an advertiser to say their name and stuff. The more people you have listening, the more appealing that is, and so it all comes back to that listener base. I mean, there are other ways to do it through website stuff, through magazine, through how I found what you guys are diversifying a lot on the internet. CGS is doing some print stuff now. That's all ways to help generate the income that will hopefully keep these things going and make them viable.